right. Okay, awesome. I'm going to turn it over to the amazing, beautiful Tiera here to talk about LLCs and corporations today on Seal the Deal. And I'll shut up. And for once, I don't have to sit here and talk so much. So I love it. I love it. I get to learn this time.
All right, cool. So yeah, we're going to talk about LLCs and corporations and basically how they change the title process when you're working with an entity for either a buyer or a seller. Honestly, and you've probably heard me say this a lot of times, but in title, it comes down to who can sign. We just want to know whose signature is the right signature to complete this transaction, basically. So I'll kind of take you through the different types of entities that you'll see, what documents that we need and why we're asking you and bugging you for these things, and what they tell us about the transaction. And then I do have a little activity at the end, so stay awake because to me it's fun. But again, it's because I'm a nerd, but I think you guys will have fun. So why does it matter? Why do we care who when you have an entity? One, it's because not all sellers or buyers are individuals. So it kind of changes things when you have Tiera Lookable purchasing a property versus Tiera Lookable LLC purchasing a property. Because you might think, well, clearly Tiera can sign on behalf of that, but my documents might say otherwise. My documents might say that I can only transfer real estate on behalf of Tiera Lookable LLC if Bell Hall signs. So we have to have those documents to prove who's going to make this a legitimate transaction. Title issues can definitely come up if the documents aren't gathered or reviewed properly. There's always a resolution to it. It can always be fixed. The biggest problem you're going to run into, though, if your client is not prepared as an entity, is going to be delays, which is the worst thing we want to hear in real estate. So what you want to do, especially if you're working with a seller, is to just find out who can sign on behalf of the company and how is that proven. So it's not good enough for you to say, Tiera, you know what? I talked to John and he said that he can sign. That's great. I love that. But I need to see where that's proven and where everyone agrees to John being able to buy and sell real estate. And then the risks, of course, are going to be delays, rejections, as in our underwriters can say, no, I'm not insuring that. We're not closing that because I'm not convinced as to who can sign. Voided transactions, if somehow it does go through, which, you know, is what we are trying to avoid in the first place, then you can have a transaction that just, it's not real. We would have to kind of back it out. And then you have to think about it. Like, you can't just say, oh, never mind. Like, you're not going to give me your checks back. That's a insurance claim. Our insurance works the same way as your car insurance. So that's what we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to lower risk of anyone coming back and saying, oh no, that's not right. That's unenforceable. So the different types of entities that you'll come across, the main one, and I worked with LLCs with a lot of you, the limited liability corporations, and by and large, that's what you're going to run into the most around here. You can have corporations, so incorporated or corp, however you want to say it. Partnerships, you can have a general or limited partnership. And then, of course, you can have trusts, which it's a whole different beast. It's worth a mention here, but we'll talk about that in its own right at a separate session. So whenever we're talking about each of these entities, I want to show you here what we ask for each of these different entity types and why we ask for it. What does it do for us? Because I promise you, we're not just chasing these down because we think they're fun to read. We have enough stuff to go through. So LLC here on top, of course, you'll need your articles of organization, your operating agreement, your certificate of good standing, and then your EIN. And on the next page, I'll kind of show you what each of these things means, because you're going to hear these terms as you're working with these buyers and sellers. And it's just going to verify who can legally sign and bind the company to a contract. And that's really the theme throughout this whole thing. So for a corporation, your articles of incorporation, bylaws, corporate resolution, and certificate of good standing. It tells us a lot, but the main thing is going to prove who can have authority to sign or convey real estate within the corporation. Same thing with partnerships, partnership agreement, certificate of partnership, maybe a resolution. And I say maybe, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in our little activity. If the partnership agreement is written well enough, then we will know without a doubt who can sign on behalf of the partnership. If it's not, then we would require a resolution to tell us explicitly who can sign to do what within the company. So again, that just identifies the managing partners and who has the authority to sell. And then for all entities, because no matter what, we're trying to find the human within the entity that can sign, or humans on behalf of it, we'll still need a driver's license and tax ID info. So this next one, it's kind of a lot of information to take in, but you can take a picture of this or I can send it to you. It's nice to have on hand just because these are terms that you're going to hear whenever you're working with entities as buyers or sellers. And it's just nice to be familiar with it, understand what's what and which entity needs what and why. One, so that you know for yourself. And two, as I always say, knowledge is power. So the more you can have these conversations with your clients, the more you're able to build that respect and build that trust and kind of grow your client base based on that. So I'll just kind of go through it here. But again, if you want me to send it via email, I can do that so you have it, or you can take a picture, just let me know. But your articles of incorporation, this is for an LLC. So this is literally just going to say that Tiera Local LLC was filed with the state of Pennsylvania as of 2025. So now we know it exists. That's step one. Great, fantastic. Same thing for a corporation. It's just called articles of incorporation. So it'll just tell us that the corporation is legally formed as of what date and who the incorporator is. The operating agreement. So that is going to set the rules within the LLC. So this is the second thing we're going to want to see, because that's going to start to tell us who does what, who's managing member, how much percentage of ownership do people have if there's more than one person, and who can do what within the entity. Bylaws, again, are the same, but the corporate version. So that tells us who are the officers and who has signing authority. EIN letters, that's going to give us the federal tax ID number. So no different than asking an individual for their social. Now we're just asking the entity for their tax number. The certificate of good standing is just going to verify that the entity is still active. So the article of incorporation or the article of organization isn't quite enough because it doesn't tell us the whole story. It says that it existed as of 2020, I think my example says. It doesn't tell us anything that has happened between then and now. So like, has the company dissolved? Like, are you still there? We'll need to know that. And that's what the certificate of good standing tells us. And then the corporate resolution or LLC resolution, like we were talking about before, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. You would think that when you have these documents that like an attorney wrote it, or, you know, it's got to be good. Like I have this here. I don't understand why this isn't good enough. We've kind of run into that sometimes. And that's just because one, anybody can write it. And two, just because an attorney does write it doesn't mean it's clear enough for us to be okay to close with it. And so if you have the operating agreement or the bylaws and it's a little bit vague, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in our little activity, then I might come back to you and say, hey, that I can't tell for certain who is able to carry out this transaction. So I'm going to need you to have a corporate resolution or LLC resolution, whichever, that explicitly tells me who can sign on behalf of the company. So these are kind of all of the different terms that you'll hear us talk about, the different documents you'll hear us ask for. And I noticed that especially newer business owners don't quite understand why we need all three. Like, what do you mean? Here, I told you that I created this LLC. Here you go. So now you have the whole story. One, we need to know when it was created. Two, we need to know who can do what. And three, we need to know, are you still there? Like, are you still an actual company? So that's kind of the whole story there. So any questions on this stuff so far? All right. moving on. So how does it change the normal title process? Honestly, like big picture wise, it doesn't really. Most things are going to be the same. Where you're going to see the delays is going to be one, gathering the documentation that's required, and two, perhaps redrafting or drafting other documents that may be needed for clarity. So extra underwriting review, that's just them reviewing more documents that we had to ask for versus a regular transaction with individuals. A longer turnaround, but it's not really on the side of like lending or title. It's just that sometimes the entities don't have the documents that they need, and we do see a lot of delay there, just trying to get them in our hands so that we can look at them. And that's kind of where you come in whenever you are doing your listing appointments or getting your buyers ready, saying, hey, I know you're representing this company, but what do you have to prove to me and Tiera and everybody else that you are able to sign on behalf of the company? And I will say here, if they don't know what you're talking about and maybe don't have the documents that they need, I'm not a barrier there. Just let me know. We can actually help draft those things for them. You just have to understand that it's going to take a little bit longer to get that done. But it's not, I'm just not going to say, no, you need to hand it to me. If you need help, tell me. And I will, I have a team that can help you. Signing logistics, this really comes into play when you have members of an LLC or a corporation that aren't together. So say we did need that resolution. You gave us the operating agreement and it uses words like any or might or can, and we just don't like that at all. And so now we need a resolution done, but every member has to sign the resolution. So you might see a delay if one is in California, one's in Texas, and one's right here down the road from me in Newcastle, but I need them all signed and notarized. So now we have this document, kind of floating around until it's complete. And then the biggest thing that I run into is wiring proceeds, or even a check for that matter. It has to go to the company, not the individual member. And we get a lot of pushback on that. And that's because the company is the owner of the property. So again, for example, even in Tiera Lookable LLC, you cannot make my check, or I can't, out to Tiera Lookable. The individual does not work that way. It has to go to the company. So some red flags that we look for, because again, in the title industry, from my perspective, it's all risk-based, and we want to make sure that it's a good transaction, that nobody can come in and say, absolutely not, that was unenforceable, we have to back the whole thing out. So one thing is entities formed recently. That matters way more on the seller side than it does on the buyer side, because I don't care if you give me a contract and it's in Anna Rogers' name, and then a week later she's like, no, I actually want to put this in ABC LLC. Okay, that's fine. We'll help you create it. Don't care. But whenever you're talking about sellers, and we surprisingly get this pretty often, it's like, okay, well, I'm the owner, or this company's the owner, but I want to sell it and I want the proceeds to go to this new company that I just, like, you're screaming for like more documentation, questions, delays. Normally, if you're selling a property, it was in the name of the company to begin with. So that's really not a good route to go if you're trying to kind of skirt the system, because it just raises a bunch of red flags. Entities owned by another entity, that is less of a red flag and more of a, oh, dang it. Because when you start to get into, okay, ABC LLC owns Red Flag LLC, which owns, Whiteboard LLC, and then you're just tracking down what human can sign on behalf of this or that. To me, it's kind of fun because I'm a nerd. It's like a big puzzle to figure out. But again, that's if documentation is correct and it was written clearly and explicitly. Disputes between partners and members, that's another thing that can come up if the original documents aren't drafted correctly. Because what if Jamie and I are in business, Jamie and Tiera LLC, and our agreement says that Jamie can sign unilaterally, all by herself, on behalf of Jamie and Tiera LLC to buy and sell real estate. That's great. That's perfect. That's all we need to know. But what if it didn't say that? What if it said either member can sign on behalf of the company for real estate? Okay, like either as in either one, or do they have to sign together? And now Jamie doesn't want to buy the property that I want to buy, or Jamie doesn't want to sell the property I want to sell. And now there's this sidebar of an argument, which I have unfortunately been a part of, until they can figure out who wants to do what. So that's kind of the downfall of any ambiguity within your agreements. And then, of course, the signer saying, I'm the owner, but can't produce documentation. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care what's on your business card or LinkedIn. It just doesn't matter. It has to be one of the documents that we've gone over already that tells me for sure that you can sign on behalf of the company. And then we're going to start our little activity next, which I'm excited about. Do you guys have any questions about anything so far? All right. So we are going to go over 3 different companies, company A, B, and C. And then we're going to talk about who can sign on behalf of the company in different situations. So you'll kind of get my perspective on how we have to look at these things. So I'll just kind of read through this once, and this will be up there the whole time. We have like 3 or 4 questions. I don't remember how many I put on here. But we have company A, so Anchor Holdings, LLC. Jane Smith is the owner, and she's the sole member and managing member. So she can sign for company A. It's just her. She can sign and do whatever she wants. Company B, Bayview Investments, is owned by Anchor Holdings. Anchor Holdings is the sole member. And so we know that if it's owned by Anchor Holdings and Jane Smith can sign for Anchor Holdings, then Jane Smith can sign for Bayview Investments. And then company C, Coastal Ventures, is owned by Bayview Investments. Bayview in this situation has 2 members. So Anchor Holdings and Ocean Edge. And so Anchor Holdings is an LLC with 60% ownership, and Ocean Edge is an incorporation with 40%. And then Ocean Edge has a president that's Mike Johnson, has a secretary that's Sarah Lee, and has a corporate resolution that shows that Mike can 100% sign on behalf of Coastal Ventures. So the question is, who can sign on behalf of Anchor Holdings? You're supposed to answer it.
Jane.
Yep.
Jane Smith. Yeah.
Perfect.
I thought it was a trick question, Tiera.
No, because it
I'm
gets
kidding.
harder. It gets
I'm
harder.
kidding. I'm on 2 computers here. I got it.
All right. So who can sign on behalf of Bayview Investments? Real question.
Jane
Just
Smith.
Amy.
Company A, owned by Anchor. Oh, okay.
So just Jane Smith.
Still Jane. Yep,
Jane for
exactly.
sure, yeah.
And then who can sign on behalf of Coastal Ventures if the operating agreement states that all members must approve the transfer of real property?
Jane.
Would it be all of them?
Yeah.
Who? What are their names? What do we have to put on the
Mike.
signature?
Jane. Bayview Investment.
Just Mike, right? Mike, because the secretary. I mean, is that someone that necessarily? Sorry, I'm like I know you said something about the secretary, but I didn't hear that part. But wouldn't it just be Mike because it says Mike can sign?
It does. So here's the thing. It's actually going to be
Jane.
Mike Johnson and Jane.
Mike and Jane.
Because if Coastal Ventures is owned by Bayview and Ocean Edge here, I don't know if you can see my little mouse, but if it's owned by Bayview here and Ocean Edge, first we'll look at Bayview and say, well, who can sign on behalf of Bayview? Well, we already decided that Jane could. We know that. We're good to go. And then for Ocean Edge, Mike is the president. The secretary, that was just there to throw you off. It's all in a sea of other information that we have to pick out. And the corporate resolution shows explicitly that Mike can sign on behalf of the company. So then if the operating agreement says that all members must approve, then we need a signature from Jane and Mike. Does that make sense? Now, what happens if the operating agreement says that Bayview Ventures LLC can act unilaterally on behalf of the company? Then who can sign for Coastal Ventures?
Bayview.
Just Jane.
Yep, exactly. I saw you too, Ebony. Just Jane. Exactly. So it's kind of a puzzle that you have to put together as to who can do what, and it gets a lot more complicated than that. But it's you don't have to know that. It's just for perspective. These are the kind of things that we're looking
my dad's
for.
stuff.
Exactly. and we Rebecca and I actually had a situation where it was written in the trust documents that one could sign on behalf of the other, but the way that it was written was a little, once I talked to the attorney, I was like, oh, okay, got it. But at first glance, I was like, no, you both need to be here. So this is kind of the situations that come up all the time.
Because he sold a trust to his company bought a trust,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was the trustee, so he was the person that would sign
Mm-hmm.
for the LLC.
Yeah, it was
Like a
super
company. I've been through the wings with LLCs.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yep. Yeah. So that it can really get some layers going. That's for sure. We actually had one. We have an investor that we work with, and I don't really understand his plan, and I'm not an investor, so I don't know. But he'll create an LLC for every property, but then the next LLC becomes the owner of the previous one. So you can imagine how that gets like insane. I don't understand it. I'm sure he's found some benefit that he is getting.
I know that when my dad came here and started buying houses, he created a trust for every property. So, and they were taught to not use so they didn't use the exact address when they created the trust. So every trust he's created with the address has been like, okay, it's the road. It's not.
Yeah.
So it's Chestnut 733 LLC.
Yeah.
It's different every one. And then another thing that I came up with that I called you, Tiera, about it was an LLC that was bought by someone else, and they signed the document showing that they took ownership of the LLC, but the original operating agreement from the original owner was not signed, and that was a big thing. We're trying to figure out.
Yeah, and that hits on all the points. One, there's some ambiguity now as far as who can sign. Two, another document that needed signed by everyone for us to move forward. It's a perfect example. And then speaking of the ambiguity, I have 3 examples here of what a corporate resolution can look like and how we would interpret it or what might happen if it looks like this. So example 1 for signing authority, it says any document or instrument purporting to bind the LLC shall be effective to bind the LLC when executed by A, the managing member, or B, any person authorized by the managing member pursuant to section 5.1 hereof, including an officer of the LLC acting within the scope of his or her authority. What questions would you have about that? Would you say, all right, cool, that's perfect? Or do you have questions? You tell me. Does that tell you clearly that you'll be able to find the human that can sign? No. What are you thinking, Ebony? What
Well,
stands out?
because he says any person authorized by the managing member.
Yep. Immediately no. Any person. How do I know that they're authorized? Right? Like I need immediately more documentation. You can't just tell me they are. How do I know that the process for them to be authorized has taken place? And then any officer acting within the scope of his or her authority. What's your authority, bud? I don't know you. So it's funny, isn't it? It's very like you're not giving me anything. Like you got to help me out a little bit here.
So in this case, wouldn't it be that let's say they want someone else to have authorization to sign, they would then have to have an attorney create an addendum that adds them to sign, be able to have authority to sign, like
honestly, this would be in the agreement, the original LLC agreement. So this is a situation where we would need a resolution that says, no, this is exactly what I mean. Like I need the any to be out of there. I need you to not expect me to know the scope of your authority. I need a resolution that says this person or these people can sign on behalf of this company for the transfer of real property. That's what we're looking for. Even if this is on the resolution, I would say, you got something else that all members sign. And then for example number 2, any member may bind the company in the ordinary course of business. What do you guys think about that one? Do you like it? Do you know who can sign?
yes, as long as you have the operating agreement with the members.
Okay. And then how do you know what the ordinary course of business is for Tiera Lookable LLC? Or am I talking with like the janitor?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Right. It's just, and you can kind of, when you first glance at it, you're like, all right, cool. Anybody. I love that. Sure. We hate that. That's awful. I want to know for sure who can sign on behalf, because you might be a member and you don't know nothing about anything, but it says any member. So then they kind of add in the ordinary course of business. Okay, I'm sure you know what your ordinary course of business is. I don't know how often you buy and sell real estate. I don't know who you told could buy or sell. So there's that second part to it that I can't know. I don't know that. So then example 3 is, this is what we like to see. The company shall be managed by a manager. The initial manager shall be Jane Smith. The manager shall have the exclusive right to act for and bind the company, including the authority to sign any document relating to the purchase, sale, or encumbrance of real estate on behalf of the company. No member other than the manager shall have such authority unless authorized in writing by the manager. Bingo. Chef's kiss. It tells me who can, and it tells me who cannot, and it tells me what needs to happen if that needs to change. So that's what I talk about when I'm saying zero ambiguity, not being vague. Now we know. I need no further documentation. All I need is Jane's signature, or whoever. I don't know. Yeah, Jane. Does that make sense? I think that's the end of my little, yeah. All right. Questions, conversation. What do you guys think?
Really great information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What do
You guys
think,
have
Heather?
any questions or comments not related to LLCs or corporations?
No, I think you do such a good job at teaching that nobody has any questions because you cover everything.
Well, I try. Thank you.
You do. You do very well. You do very, very well.
All right. Well, that's it, guys.
All
Another
right.
one down.
Thank you so much. This was really informative. And what's you're back in 2 weeks. So what's the topic for 2 weeks?
Deed types.
Ooh, excellent.
Yeah, I like that one. That one's fun.
Excellent. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks, same time, same place. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Tiera, for presenting and taking time out of your day.
Of course. I'll see you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.